Today, we're going to knock out a longer list of skills than normal, 5 to be precise, since instead of complexity, most of these skills have much more direct utility. But despite this, they are still often extremely underestimated by new and veteran players alike because of their lack of flashy behavior. And while we will be getting to why Inner Sight is pretty much a mini conviction for martial characters, let's get the basic stuff out of the way first, with Critical Strike, Penetrate, and Pierce, with probably the most obvious of the three being Pierce, which, as it says on the tin, gives you a % chance to pierce a target with a missile attack, which on the Amazon is mostly used for arrows, bolts, and javelins, but it does also function on things like throwing knives and throwing axes. As far as the mechanics of it, Pierce triggers its normal on-strike effects on a target, and rolls to see if it will go through them, potentially hitting an enemy behind them, and then doing the same to that enemy. This check can happen up to 4 times, which means up to 5 targets being hit, and at 100% Pierce, which can be achieved by stacking this with certain items, you can get these numbers fairly regularly. The only catch is that you have to succeed at a hit check to have a chance of the missile actually piercing. If it pierces and you didn't hit, you will sometimes get ghost projectiles that end up having nothing but a visual effect. That said, if it's blocked instead, it can still pierce like normal, so all you have to do is get by the normal target's defense. Moving up, we have Penetrate, a skill that strictly adds attack rating to your character, on a % basis. This is actually a pretty powerful skill in a number of builds for getting that chance to hit up, and is almost a guaranteed pick for warrior princess Amazons who use swords and daggers. The only catch to this skill is that it does not stack with Blessed Aim specifically, since Blessed Aim sadly overwrites Penetrate's boost, so try to avoid that skill when possible if you're relying on this to hit. After that, we have Critical Strike, the last of the 3 truly passive skills, and it's again another skill that does what it says on the tin, giving a chance at dealing double damage via Critical Strike. And while it does not stack with equipment-based Deadly Strike or the skill-based Weapon Mastery Critical Strike, they are all mutually exclusive, meaning if you trigger one, the others cannot trigger, even if they're 100% chance, so you really only need to stack up one source of this usually, if possible, and use your points elsewhere. But since this is a prerequisite for better skills, it's not bad to have around and let plus skills do the rest. Now, moving over to the more active side, we have 2 skills, Slow Missile and the severely underestimated Inner Sight. With Slow Missile, we have a non-exclusive curse of sorts that slows down enemy missile attacks, and since it's non-exclusive, we can use it alongside Inner Sight as well as a Necromancer or Barbarian curse effect, so it stacks pretty well, as the generally best use for this is shortening the range of enemy missiles instead, since missile range is based on duration, not a fixed distance. The skill is a bit more useful since the release of 2.4, but still not something I go out of my way to dump into. And finally, the skill that almost everyone forgets exists, but is actually pretty powerful, Inner Sight, which is a skill you can get from Act 1 mercenaries, but is also an active skill on the Amazon. The core function of this skill is simply lowering enemy defense, though unlike Conviction, it decreases it by a flat amount rather than by a %, meaning it can actually reduce enemies to the bare minimum of 0 defense, at least at higher levels or at lower level enemies. At first, this may not seem extremely possible since players can get up to some pretty high defense values if they try, but when you realize that even the Ubers cap out a bit over 3400 defense, with the mini Ubers being about 1000 lower than that, you'll quickly see that a high level Inner Sight can equate to a significant dent against them, much less normal monsters which sit closer to the 1500 range even at the higher ends of hell. Meaning a mid-level Inner Sight can quickly make a double-digit boost to your chance to hit %, which makes many times a much bigger impact than even an equal investment in Penetrate for your attack rating. And if you combine the two, you can get some pretty nice hits going. Now, the question will inevitably come up, how do Inner Sight and Conviction work together? Which is basically answered with, they stack in the least effective way possible. Simply put, Inner Sight takes effect first, and then Conviction is applied to the resulting value. That said, Inner Sight also applies before effects like Shout and Defiance as well, so using it against the Ancients is very welcome, though sadly it is applied after Stone Skin, so you can't really curb that ability's bonus very well. Overall, the Amazon's passive and magic skills are very frequently underestimated in their utility, in favor of dumping as much as you can into the flashier skills. But when applied properly, they can greatly improve the efficiency of those flashy skills by letting you hit and pierce more to trigger more of those lightning furies or freezing arrows. So, do you dump many points into the Amazon passive tree, or do you stick strictly to those flashy skills? Mention it down below, and a special thanks to channel patrons and members for their continued support.